What's up everyone, it's a Knife Out here, and today I'm going to be doing my full review on the Spyderco Dragonfly. And this is the one in K390 steel, and honestly I have not really used K390 enough to give you guys the full details on it. I'll talk about that more when I get into the blade. But this knife specifically, it's been kind of a weird knife for me because it's a knife that I really like and I've really enjoyed using, and it's probably one of my favorite Spydercos that I own. But it's also one of those that it's kind of hard to suggest. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But this has been a knife that is kind of weird in the way that I don't really look at it much or really admire it at all. A lot of times if I'm kind of getting ready to review a knife, sometimes if I have some downtime, I'll take it out of my pocket, flip it open, kind of check my edge, check how the blade looks, see if there's anything that I haven't missed. And it's one of those things where I feel like sometimes I'll catch things like, oh, the grind on the tip is a little bit off there. Maybe there's a little bit of a sharp spot there. I don't know. It's just something that I kind of got in the habit of doing, and I still do. Some people just kind of open and close them, but I kind of like to look at them more detailed. It's one of those things where this has been a knife that I kind of just throw in my pocket. The only time I'm really looking at it is when I'm using it, and then once I get home, I pretty much either lay it on the counter or put it in my knife case, and then I put it back in my pocket the next day. So it's kind of been a boring knife for me, but it has been one that I've really used a lot, and I've really enjoyed having it in my pocket. And it's such a small knife that I don't really carry this by itself. I usually have been pairing it up with this Manix 2. I feel like it's a pretty good looking combo right there, but it's one of those knives that I feel like it really surprised me, like how small it is, but how big it actually is. I'll talk about that a little bit more, but just the anatomy of this knife, what it's built up of. It's, like I said earlier, it's K390 steel with these blue FRN handle scales, a deep carry wire pocket clip, tip up, left hand, right hand. So this is a fully ambidextrous knife since it is a backlock, and it's made in the Spyderco Seki City, Japan factory, which this is a factory that I haven't really had the best experience with. Probably, I've never got anything from their Chinese factory. That's where like the Tenacious is made. But I assume the Seki City, Japan factory and that one are the two worst ones, or that's what I would guess. But anyway, let's talk a little bit more about the looks. So the looks on this knife, like I said, I'm not really admiring it at all, so I don't really care how it looks. And my job, I have to work out in bad weather a lot of times just because, if the weather's bad, I have to be inside or outside no matter what. And so one time it was raining a bunch and I had this knife in my pocket and there are some rust spots on it. I got a bunch of it off with some Flitz polish, but there were a little bit of kind of deeper, darker patina spots. And I'm thinking that I might either just forget about the rust, just not ever put any oil or EDCI on this thing, and then just kind of let it do its thing. Or maybe I do a forced patina. I don't really know. I just kind of like to experiment with it. But K390 will rust, but honestly, it took a whole lot of rain because my clothes were pretty much soaked after that day. So it took a whole lot of water in order to get this thing to rust. And the Spy 27 on my Manix was completely fine, but it's one of those things where I think a bunch of people are going to freak out about rust, and if you have a rust eraser, if you have some Flitz polish, it's really not that big of a deal if you don't want any, and if you're fine with a little bit, it kind of builds character with your knife. Obviously you don't want to rust the thing to death because that can be bad for the steel's kind of just like the steel in general. I don't really know the science behind it. I just know that rust on metal isn't really good for the strength and longevity of the steel, but it's one of those things where it doesn't bother me that much, so I'm still kind of deciding on what I should do in the future. Also, you might notice that I kind of messed up on sharpening here. What I do a lot of times with Spydercos is towards the base, a lot of times from the factory, they won't sharpen it all the way to the end. So what I do is on my first sharpening, I'll put this on a diamond stone, use the corner of it, and then just kind of go back and forth because it's just a 90-degree corner. And usually it works out well, kind of like it did on my Manix right here. I did that and it looks pretty good. But this one, I must have like raised up my knife like this to the point where it kind of flared up at the end. And that's one of those things where as a sharpener, I feel like I've gotten better in the way of patience, I guess, because I know this is not a knife that I'm admiring or really looking at all that much. And so I know that eventually I will be able to sharpen that out, but there's no real point in doing it now since it doesn't affect the functionality of it at all. Let's move on a little bit. Let's talk about this blade. So K390, how has it held up in my experience? Honestly, I've been cutting things like tape, breaking down maybe a small box here and there. I have not really done anything crazy with it. I have sharpened it twice, I think, not because it needed it, just because I wanted to sharpen it. But I keep it, the edge that I keep it on is a 600 grit edge off my Atoma diamond plate. And then I just got some new stropping compound, which is 4 micron poly diamond emulsion from Jindy Industries. I think that's how you pronounce it. But I've been enjoying it. I think it leaves a pretty good edge on this. And this thing does a really good job at holding its fine edge. I'm very used to a lot of steels like S35VN, kind of like on this ProTech SBR. And it's one of those things where S35VN is a steel that it's okay, but it loses its fine edge very fast. And so fine edge, in my opinion, is like that hair shaving edge. And usually after the hair shaving edge is gone, I will strop the knife. So I feel like with S35VN, I'm stropping it a lot more. This is a knife that, you can carry for a week. If you remember it, strop it, and you're pretty much good to go. That's one thing I really like about it. And that's one thing that I've noticed I like about a lot of these high-end tool steels and things like M4 and K390. They really hold their fine edge well. And even though I don't need a steel to be like that, especially on this small of a knife, it's one of those things that is kind of nice. But I also like to sharpen too, so I don't really sharpen it much. But it's one of those things where I feel like K390 on a small knife like this is a very good combo because, like I said, I'm not paying attention to this knife that much. I'm not really looking at it, keeping that good of care of it, and so I'm not really remembering to sharpen it all that much. And I feel like K390, it's a steel that you can kind of just forget about, keep using, and I'm really just cutting plastics with this, so there's no real need to have an ultra razor sharp hair shaving edge on that. And so I think that K390 is a pretty good steel option on this, but also it's also kind of a little bit too extreme in my opinion. I feel like, like I said, you're cutting paper and plastic with this thing. You don't need one of the best knife steels out there. So it is what it is. You guys make your own decision on that. But what I'm excited for in K390 is that new stretch release that Spyderco released in the new reveal. It's a straight back, or it's like got the straight spine, and it's in K390, and it's the same colorway on that new stretch. And I'm really excited for that. I think I'll pick that up, really use it, and get a good feel for K390. I just can't do that much with this just because I'm not really using it and abusing it like I could with a steel. Like, for example, if the K390 was on a Manix that I had or something along those lines, I could really use that more, but it's one of those things that I'm not using this knife for much, so it is what it is. But here's a little size comparison because I forgot to do it. It's not going to be that much just because I don't really have any knives in this size range. But there's the Manix on top, Native on bottom. Here's the ProTech SBR, and then last but not least, actually probably least on this list, the Victorinox Cadet. Here it is. So Cadet and Dragonfly are pretty similarly sized knives, and I both carry them for the same thing. Kind of that fifth pocket. Oh, if you're in a situation where it's a little bit awkward and you don't know if you should pull out a big 3.5-inch knife, you can pull out one of those and be just fine with it. So one thing that I've enjoyed about this blade is how thin it is ground behind the edge. Let me get a quick measurement for you guys. So 12 thousandths, yep, 12 thousandths on the dot right there towards the middle. I'll measure at the base too. 11.5, so about 12 thousandths. Yep, that's good enough for me. This stock is also very thin on here. I didn't really check if this was zeroed out when I put it back, but yeah, it's under 90 thousandths on the stock thickness, so very thin at the stock, very thin behind the edge, at least for Spyderco's usual grinds. And so for those reasons, this thing cuts like butter. It's a very good performing knife, and it would not make sense at all for this knife to be anything above 15 thousandths behind the edge. So I'm glad that Spyderco really ground that thinner. Whether they were trying to do it on purpose or not, I don't know, but it still was it's a very good thinness behind the edge and a very good slicer, and it just performs at cutting tests, and it does a very good job with them. For this blade shape, I really like it. It's just simple, kind of that leaf blade shape. It's got a gradual belly throughout with a little bit of flat at the base. I like it because that tip is pretty low and I do a lot of cuts like this, and so I think it's very functional and very useful for things like that, and I really like it. They are coming out with the Wharncliffe version of this K390 Dragonfly, which looks pretty cool. It was also in the new reveal for 2021, but I don't know how long it'll be until those get out to dealers, but I feel like if I had to choose between those two, I'd choose the Wharncliffe just because I'm mostly doing little utilitarian cuts with this knife, but I still think that this is a good blade shape. And I probably won't get the Wharncliffe just because I'm not going to drop all that money just for a new blade shape that really isn't that different. But anyway, I'm a big fan of this blade. I feel like this high-end blade steel on this very small knife does a great job. The blade shape's good. It's thin behind the edge. It's just a great performing blade, and I really have enjoyed using it. And I feel like you still, I mean, honestly, I could probably, I don't really want to test this just because it kind of hurt me on the inside, but I feel like I could carry this for a while and not really feel the need to have a bigger knife. I do process a lot of cardboard, which it is nice to have a long blade for that. Not that you really need a long blade, but you know, you can go a little bit faster if you do more of like, instead of a push cut, you do kind of a cut like that instead of just going straight down. So it will be one of those things that would be more difficult, but I feel like you could really give this knife to someone and it'd fill all their daily basic needs. And sometimes I will grab this and just throw it in like the pocket of my sweatpants or something if I'm just going out for something little or not doing anything where I expect to actually use a knife. So I've rambled on a lot. We're already 11 minutes into the video. Let me get into some of the issues with this, and this is where it comes to fit and finish. So if we look at the centering, this centering is off. You know, not that big of a deal to me because I don't really care about the action or the looks on this, but it is in that $90 to $100 price range. So it's one of those things where, I mean, honestly, I would like it to be on center. And the biggest issue that there is with fit and finish is there's a little bit of lock rock with this knife. Listen closely. A little bit of up and down play on there, and I really don't know why that's a thing. It's just Spyderco, they a lot of times have some of the best backlocks out there. Like this native is just rock solid lockup, such a good lock, and just it feels like one of the most solid locks that I own. I mean, they just do a good job with backlocks a whole lot of times, but this one, for some reason, it's got a little bit of lock rock. Now let me get out my handy dandy spine whacker, the roll of painter's tape, and just, I'm using a whole lot of force doing that, and it is not failing at all, so it doesn't really bother me that much, but I'm just curious why that's the case. Maybe it's harder to machine such thin parts and still get a really solid lockup. I don't know, because sometimes you'll see like traditional backlocks, like GECs or cases or something, have up and down play, and maybe it's harder to get a more solid lockup when you have thinner parts, like a thinner back spring and a thinner stock. That's honestly the only thing I can think of with this. I've tried to mess with the spring tension of the back lock, but I haven't really had any luck with that. So it's one of those things where I don't know why that's an issue, but it won't fail on me. And honestly, this knife could be a slip joint and it'd still be fine with me. So even though I don't like that issue with the lock rock, functionally speaking, like a whole lot of things in this knife, it works fine. It's just not, it just makes this knife a little bit harder to suggest. Just a little quick note, the inside of these liners are knocked down pretty well, which sometimes with Spyderco's FRN versions, it's kind of a hit or miss. Like on the Pair 3 lightweight, that's not knocked down very well, but you know, the Sage 5 lightweight, the Manix 2 lightweight, it's knocked down pretty well on those, so it kind of depends on the model, I guess. But next, let's talk about the ergos of this knife, and I have been really impressed by this, and it was something that really shocked me when I first got this knife in hand, because you can get 4 fingers on this thing, and it's such a small knife. It really amazes me how you can do that. It's just like, it almost feels like a full-size knife in my hand. It honestly feels more comfortable than this ProTech SBR, because my hand, with this one, my pinky kind of slips off down there, and it honestly feels like a 3-finger grip in my hand. But this little tiny Dragonfly, I can get all 4 fingers on and really get a good purchase on it. Now, am I realistically going to be using this knife in this grip very much? No. But one good thing about it is it really excels in other grips too. You'll notice this little attention to detail part right here. Spyderco put a chamfer on both sides of the spine, and it basically just smooths out the top right there. And I really like that because I feel like Spyderco knew that we were going to be putting our finger on the top. I said we, like multiple people use this knife, but people who use the Dragonfly will put their finger on the top there, and so they smoothed it out to make it a lot more comfortable. And I really do use my finger up here a lot with cuts like that, and I feel like it's really comfortable. Also, the pinch grip works very well for this one. You can either do the pinch grip and a back grip like this, I guess, or you could even put your middle finger in that choil and get super up close and personal with this thing and really get a lot of work done. This thing honestly just feels like a little box cutter in my pocket, and it's so lightweight it doesn't really feel like anything, which I guess leads us into the carry of this knife, which is really good. I believe this knife comes in at like 1.2, 1.3 ounces, which is just absolutely crazy. It's super lightweight. You do not notice this thing at all in your pocket, and it fits pretty much perfectly into your fifth pocket. A lot of people might get upset that this pocket clip is not all the way back here, and then the lanyard hole is moved off to the side. Personally, I feel like Spyderco, they do a lot of things for a reason. I personally don't know why that pocket clip isn't all the way back there, but I think that maybe if it was, you'd have to test this out, so I don't really know. Maybe the fifth pocket of your jeans wouldn't go all the way up to the back of that deep carry clip. I'm not sure. All I do know is that it gives me a little bit to grab onto. It's lightweight, it carries very good, and I have no complaints with it whatsoever. It is a little bit wide in the pocket, but I mean, it fits in my fifth pocket, so I don't care how wide it is. It's not like I'm keeping anything else in there, so the carry on this thing is great, and I've been really happy with carrying this. And honestly, when I don't carry it a lot of times, I feel like a staple of my EDC is missing now. Like, I feel like anytime I'm wearing jeans or more kind of warm weather clothes, I'm going to be having this knife in my pocket. Now, in the summer, if I'm wearing like more athletic, lightweight shorts, and I don't know if I'm going to carry multiple knives, but I feel like this one is going to be a knife that I really pair with a lot of other knives in my everyday carry. For the next category, let's talk about the action on this. Really simple. It's a backlock. I have no issues with it. Actually, I might have one issue. I'll go ahead and talk about that. But one little tip for closing it is this knife is so small that you can just kind of put your finger up here in this hole, disengage that lock, and just kind of take it all the way down like that. As you see there. You basically disengage it, get your fingers out of the way, and bring it all the way down. You don't have to do this. It's just so small that you can do this, and it actually is very easy to close like that. I wonder if you can do it with something like the Manix, or no, the Native. You can kind of do it. It's just not as comfortable. But this one, it's very easy to do that with, and that's really, after I learned it, that's how I close it. If you're worried about flicking this thing out, you can thumb flick it with enough force. I think you have to use some wrist to Spidey flick it. Yeah, you have to use a little bit of wrist for that. I don't really care. I didn't expect it to be good action with the back lock. But one issue I guess I kind of have with this, but I don't really know a solution to this problem. A lot of times at my work, there's these things that have stickers on them or like labels that have barcodes and stuff on them. And I have to peel them off with my knife, and this is the knife that I use a lot of times for that, just because it's small. I don't need to pull out like a Manix or something just to peel off a label, so I will just use this thing to do it. And my main issue is a lot of times after you peel it off, these little baskets are foldable, so you know, I'll close all four of the flaps and basically it'll be all folded up, but I usually do it fast, so you peel off the label and then close it, and I don't really have time to peel it off, close all the way, put it back in my or close all the way and then fold it. I just don't have the time for that. So what I end up doing, I just peel off the label, keep the knife like that, and then lift it up like this. Yes, it is a little bit dangerous, but I've never cut myself yet, and you know, I live dangerous with my Spyderco Dragonfly in my pocket, but I haven't had any issues with it whatsoever. Like I said, I don't really have a solution to this problem. I just like knives, kind of like an Axis lock, because I open it, peel it, and then close it up like that really fast, and I really don't have any issues with opening and closing it over and over again. This one, it's a little bit annoying when I do that, but honestly, that's not really that much of a problem at all either. That's kind of my conclusion with this knife. It's like a lot of these things are little problems, maybe aesthetic or just kind of fun problems, I guess you could call them. But at the end of the day, this thing is a great performing knife. It's a little box cutter in your pocket. But that brings us to that price tag, $90 to $100. Don't remember the exact number, for a box cutter in your pocket. This is where it's hard to suggest, because it's like, I don't really get, I mean, I understand the price point, just because Spyderco, they have knives kind of similarly. If they were shrunk down to the size of the Dragonfly, they'd probably come in at around $90 to $100. But I feel like this knife really has a lot of potential to be good when it comes to being someone's first knife, you know, because imagine giving this to someone new to the knife world, maybe your friend or something, and they don't want to lug around a big Mannix in their pocket all the time and know, oh, constantly, oh, I got a big knife on me. They could just throw this at the bottom of their pocket with their keys or something, completely forget about it because it's so lightweight, and then if they need it during the day, just realize, oh yeah, I got a knife on me, I can use that. Oh, the knife comes in handy. Oh, now I want a bigger knife. Now I want a Sabenza, and now they are hooked in the knife world. See, it works just like that, super fast. No, I'm just joking. But it's one of those things where I feel like this knife has the potential to be a first for a lot of people, just because it's so small, so discreet, but also so functional. But I feel like coming in at that price point, it's just a little bit too high, and that is the K390 version. So if you're going to get your friend a knife, he doesn't need K390. They're not going to know the difference from K390 or VG10. But also the VG10 version is, I think it's around $60, which is too expensive in my opinion. It's just like, I feel like if someone was like, hey, I want a knife, they're going to be thinking that the knife that they're going to get is going to be $15 to maybe $25. Even if you said $40, which is a kind of baseline budget price point in the knife world today, they'd probably be like, oh wow, that's kind of expensive. And it's just like one of those things where if you tell them $60 for a knife of this size, it's just like they're probably going to laugh at you, or just, you know, not really be interested as much. So I feel like for these reasons I've listed, I really like this knife. I really like using it. I think it's super functional, and I really like the Dragonfly line as a whole. But my main problem is it's hard to suggest to people just because of that price point, and the Seki City factory has its fit and finish issues. So that's going to do it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you're new. A little bit of news. I just recorded the Gale Bradley 2 versus Sabenza versus Umnunzan kind of testing video. That took a little bit. It was fun to make though, and so that will probably be going up Thursday. But that is going to do it for the video. Thanks for watching. I already said the whole thing, so I will see you guys in the next one.